Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with guest host Alena Sviderskaia, and hopefully I didn't butcher her name.
You did well.
I did a good job. Yay, kudos to me. So I'd love if you kind of let us know a little bit about your background. So you come to us from a background of accounting, and then now you're in the coaching space. But I'd love if you elaborate a little bit more about what you're doing now, and then we'll go back in time and see what you were like as a kid and get you back to present day. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Luki. And I'm really, really happy to be here and share my experience. Hopefully it can help somebody to inspire. So right now I am focusing on leadership. So I'm a coach focusing on leadership, and I work with organizations, and my main focus is helping them turn their managers into people leaders, really confident, somebody who inspires and empowers their team, and actually somebody who's engaged in what they do, know what they do, and get results. So this is kind of my focus right now. Like you mentioned, my background comes from finance and accounting. My journey was nothing but linear. It was really up and down, and it's still going on. But I started with going to psychology degree, getting a psychology degree, because I always wanted to be a psychologist. Always, my dream was to be a therapist. I read one book when I was 13, and that was it. I knew what I wanted to do. I actually I actually don't know the name of it. I remember it was yellow. Okay. My memory is really hazy on that, but it was about social psychology and how we interact with each other. And it was like somebody opened the doors to this whole new world, saying, hey, we can understand why we do things. And for me, it was so fascinating. It was no turning back. I wanted to be a therapist. There was something about kind of helping people navigate this fascinating world that really appealed to me. So I went to McGill University, and I graduated from psychology to the PhD in psychology and becoming a therapist. I completely switched to accounting and finance, and that's where my journey continued for the next 11 years. And eventually, I kind of found my way back to the coaching. So that's very brief overview.
Sure, and would love to dive a little bit more into part of that journey. So if you can kind of turn back the clock and go back in time. So what was Alena like as a kid? What was she like kind of growing up? Like some of the influences that kind of started her off? Like what can you remember, maybe some of the earliest, most interesting, positive memory that you have?
Oh my God, there's so many. And a lot of them actually revolve around books. I was a reader. I started reading really, really early on. Actually, my grandma taught me how to read way before I went to school, because I was annoying her asking her to read me more and more and more books every day. So she said, you know what, maybe I can just teach her how to read, and so she can kind of do it on her own. And from then on, I just read and read and read. And there was something, every book was kind of almost like a travel experience for me, right? I was able to put myself in the shoes of different people, see different places, different situations. And I think it really shaped me as a person, because it allowed me to, again, get a glimpse of what it's like to be in someone's shoes. So it helped me with compassion. It helped me with being sensitive to other people's situations. And that probably also contributed to my desire to be a therapist and eventually a coach as well. I was also somebody, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what were some of those memorable books? Because actually, in one of my practices, empathy is kind of a very big thing, and you kind of touched on it, where actually, in order to practice empathy, you can actually read rich fiction, right? Because exactly you said, you are put into someone else's shoes, and by doing that, you become more empathetic. So I think it's that. But what were some of those memorable books that folks might be able to pick up and say, well, these kind of shaped you or changed you, so that that might inspire some as well?
There's so many. So one of the books that kind of stand out to me when I was a kid was short stories about animals by Ernst Seton Thompson. Actually, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, because I remember it from like Russian pronunciation, but it was short books about animals, and it showed the world from a completely different perspective, and again developed that compassion towards kind of the situations and the circle of life and all of this. And I read a lot of like detective stories,
Okay.
kind of trying to figure out what happens. And again, the motives and how things appear and that they may not appear the same way. I read a lot of classic books as well, like Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina.
Okay.
Loved it. Crime and Punishment. Everybody found it so gloomy, but I found it fascinating again to see how somebody is put in a certain situation and how the thoughts change, the behavior change, and somebody who would never thought of themselves being in this position and committing a crime all of a sudden find themselves in it. And so that kind of helped me try on different situations and put my judgment aside.
Sounds good. So it sounds like you were a bit of a bookworm. You were kind of immersed in kind of different sorts of literature and things like
All
that.
sorts.
And
All
then
sorts.
what was kind of the influence in high school? Because the thoughts in high school is eventually you have to go to university, college, and get a degree and all that sort of stuff. So how did that love of books, love of fiction, did that change, or was there a different sort of fascination with psychology? You mentioned a little bit. So how does that arc continue on?
Yeah. So at first, I found myself really at a crossroads. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted a career that would allow me to talk to people, because that's the part that I enjoyed, because I found, again, every person taught me something about something. And it was always fascinating. But that book in psychology just showed me that there's a whole new world that I wanted to explore. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be a psychology. And then eventually, I think reading all those books and I naturally kind of became somebody who people confided in, because I was able to just listen with fascination and curiosity instead of judgment. So people felt safe, and I've noticed that. And so people would come to me and kind of pour their hearts out, and just for the sake of listening and being heard and valued. And I said, oh my God, my job can be sitting and listening to people. And so what better way to do that is becoming a therapist. And that's what shaped my decision about where to go as a graduate of high school.
And were there any kind of constraints or other people's opinions? Like oftentimes, mom and dad, they want a lot of folks to be doctors and lawyers, accountants and engineers. Those are kind of the typical thing. Was that there, or was there a freedom and flexibility to say, you know what, I want to be a psychologist. I want to listen to people's problems, and that's what I'm going to do. Was there any of that?
Yeah, so both my parents are engineers.
Okay.
So as you're saying that, so both my parents are engineers. But you know what? I was really, really lucky in the sense that nobody pushed me anywhere. Looking back at my childhood, I never felt pressure to go into any specific direction. But what I do remember, though, that going to university was kind of it was non-negotiable. It's almost like it was natural to assume. It was an assumption. Nobody said, no, you have to go to university. But because both my parents were engineers, it almost became leading by example. And for me, in my mind, looking back, I said, I never questioned whether I should or should not go to university. Right. Now there are so many different ways to do this. But back then, to me, I have to go to university. But what I'm going to do is up to me.
Okay. And that's so true, where right now there's a lot more options, but I mean, back in the day, it's like education, university was the way up and out to have a successful career. And I think I'm probably in the same shoes, where I never questioned it. It's like, I always assumed I'd go to university. Now there's colleges, boot camps, there's also gap years and all sorts of different.
Exactly. And but as we're talking, it just made me realize just how much that upbringing and my family influenced me in that regard. Because maybe if I would be part of the family where nobody went to university, right, that would be a very different thought process and a very different decision making. So university would be something like maybe a more aspirational or an optional choice, right? But it just shows how that environment influences us.
Yeah, there's definitely a nature and a nurture component, whatever side of the argument you go on. So now you've kind of settled in. You have this idea of psychology there. So you've applied to schools. You get into a couple of them, and then you get into some of your courses, and then what happens? What's kind of the transition? You mentioned a stint in accounting. So how does the transition from psychology to accounting happen?
So I was I got pregnant at the last year of university. I got pregnant with twins, completely unexpected, was completely shocked by it. And that just all of a sudden, so that natural progression to the 7-year PhD program that seemed so obvious and just like it's right there, became questionable. Well, now how can I really combine having 2 little kids at home and my family is back in Russia? At this point, I moved to Canada. So I actually applied to university in Canada. So I'm so far away from everybody. Now it's a completely new world. And I have to make decisions that seem basic, but not basic anymore. And then I had somebody who was going to accounting program and they said, oh, you know what? It's a great program and the job is guaranteed. So now my practical brain said, okay, now my focus is shifting. Now I need to take care of my family. So my dreams are now becoming I'm putting them on the shelf, going into completely new direction. So that's how I ended up in accounting and became a chartered public accountant. A degree and a position, a title I never imagined myself having, but here I was.
And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about kind of that process, because having like a surprise like that, you can be quite challenging. Can you kind of go back in time and let us know a little bit about like what were kind of the first emotions and thoughts that were happening, and like how'd you wrestle with them and deal with them? Because at one side you have like this PhD, I know exactly what I want to do, and then surprise, we have twins. Very important blessings that you received.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, then it goes to that practical. So can you walk us through a little bit more on some of the decision making processes along there, or what was challenging about it, how you overcame it, and that time of life you're willing to share?
Yeah, so I'll be very honest. The first 2 weeks are probably a blur.
Okay.
Kind of just like, okay, what is going on? What's happening? What do I do now? So I had the time to kind of just sit with that, with all of the emotions and being overwhelmed and kind of just trying to picture my life, because all of a sudden everything that I knew was certain became a fog. So now all of a sudden, like the fog kind of came down and I couldn't navigate the next 100 meters. The next few steps all of a sudden became unclear. So I had to sit with this for a while and trying to and allowing all of this to settle, to kind of the mind settling into new situation and trying to see what would be the best for the both worlds. And I started exploring different things and talking to different people and saying, okay, now that the 7-year journey that I could have is no longer, I don't have that runway anymore. I need to shorten it. So what else am I strong at? What else can be useful to me in the future that I would be interested in? And one of my friends who was and doing Bachelor of Commerce at the time said, you know what, in business, there is a human side to this. There is marketing. There is all sorts of different business sides. I started reaching out to my friends, to also talking to professors, trying to understand what this program was about and how I can use my strengths and how I can bring something to the program and how the program can help me also develop and grow. And it seemed like a really good and interesting program at the time. So I said, you know what, whether I'm going to go into therapy, maybe I'm going to explore industrial psychology later on. So it kind of also allowed me to use my strength and still focus on the human aspect of that. And then once I started doing the Bachelor of Commerce program, that led me to accounting, because that honestly was just me putting on my practical hat and saying, I need to make sure that I will be able to get a good job that will allow me to provide for my kids. And that's how I moved into accounting. And from then on, the next 10, 11 years was finance and accounting in different positions.
Yeah, I'd love if you shared a little bit more about that kind of the exploration path. So you've kind of said you went down that path of commerce, of business. Your friend kind of turned you on, hey, there's all these human elements, the marketing side, the psychology or whatever it is, organizational design and all that. And then like through accounting. So you finally said, got hit by the practicality bat or whatever it is. And say, you know what, all that stuff is great, but I need to kind of settle down in something more practical. So what was that decision process, or how did you go through like deciding, you know what, I'm gonna park my hopes and dreams and aspirations and say, you know what, I'll do accounting? Like, how did you wrestle with that argument with yourself or other people around you?
Yeah, it was, you know what, it was, I think it was one moment that I remember that probably switched me to the accounting path. So I had a really fantastic professor, and it's because it's part of Bachelor of Commerce, I had to do accounting. So it wasn't my primary focus at the time, but it was one of the courses and I was taking it. And I remember, covering things like amortization and all of this. And it just didn't, like, logically just didn't fit in my brain. And so I was the person who would stay after class and talking to the professor saying, you know what, I'd like to understand this. I'm not getting this. I'm not getting this. And I would stay and I try to understand. And I remember one day him telling me, he said, you know what, I think you would be great in becoming a chartered public accountant because you have that well-rounded experience of human side and business side. And you have this curious mind where you try to understand. He said, do you know how few people actually stay and ask questions? Right. They just kind of just learn the material, pass the exams, they forget, but you're actually trying to understand. And I think it's a great quality for somebody who's doing auditing and consulting in accounting, because you're trying to really understand the situation. You're talking to somebody, you're asking questions. And he said, I often see this missing in students, that deep exploration and really deep understanding of the subject. And he said, you have that quality, and I think you would be great at it, and I could recommend you for the program. And so that's the moment. And that was a challenge to me. That was no longer, hey, I'm just doing it for the check mark. All of a sudden, I think I felt proud of myself, saying, okay, you know what, me admitting that I don't understand something, but then trying to learn it is a great thing. So he helped me see that and reinforce that behavior. And it actually probably shaped a lot of my future behavior and decisions as well. So that moment is what led me to start thinking about, maybe, you know what, maybe accounting is the right place for somebody like me and I can contribute. So probably that was that moment.
Right. So sometimes it's just amounts to one moment, one person of influence in the right place at the right time can change your trajectory completely. So that's just
100%.
And then you said that you had a good career in accounting. So tell us a little bit about that. How was the process to land that first job? Was it everything that you expected, that professor had kind of promised and dreamed? Is that exactly what he said, or were there differences along the way?
So definitely. So it was very challenging. It was a very challenging career, very challenging profession, in the sense that it constantly pushed me to learn more and to understand more. And it was always, and the first few years I worked in an audit firm. Okay. And the audit firm, the way I landed that job was part of the university recruitment process. So in accounting, the companies and the firms come in and they present themselves, and then you build connections, you build networking, and then you apply. And then kind of it was done at the university level. And I chose the most challenging. So I was in Ernst. I got a job at Ernst & Young, which was one of the top accounting firms, because I said, I want to go for the best. I want to go for the most challenging. That's the drive, the ambition. So 2 weeks after I joined, so the 2 weeks, that was the 2 weeks with the training, which was really fun. I got to bond with my fellow colleagues who were studying with me. 2 weeks after, I realized this is not the career for me. Okay. So the moment the training was over, I'm like, okay, no, this is not a career for me. I loved the people and I loved their drive, but it was very clear that you could see right away the difference between people who were there because they really wanted to be there. Right. Or people who made that decision for other reasons. And it was so clear to me, just looking at people who really enjoyed and were engaged in their work, and people who were doing that because it was their job. And I realized very, very early on that it's just the whole audit side was against my personality. I wanted to work together with people and not looking for mistakes and not telling them what they did wrong. So it was a really, really powerful experience. I learned so much through my audit and accounting days. I have a great appreciation for numbers that a lot of coaches don't have. So I have that business side of things. So I think it's a well-rounded experience. And through my career, I got to work from the audit, I moved on into the industry and I worked in financial analysis. I got to see, again, business side and financial statements and all of this, and build fantastic connection and relationship with people.
Yeah, I think that is similar to my journey, but I think I'm a little bit slower than you because it took me a couple months to figure that out, not just 2 weeks. But yeah, I was in science. I joined Deloitte, so one of the other ones in the
Here
consulting
you go.
And for me, it was like, yeah, this is okay. This is kind of what I wanted, but I don't really want to keep doing this forever. And then I eventually moved on and found something else as well. And I moved more into the business side instead of the technology side, but it echoes a lot of the same thing. So walk us through a little bit about that decision. So 2 weeks after, you already know that this isn't for you. And then it takes you a little while for you to actually transition to something else. So what is that time like? What's going on in your head as you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, so that was probably the most challenging part, because on one hand I have my kids at home, so that's my motivation to actually continue doing this. And the first 2 years in audit is going to school 3 times a week from 6 to 9, doing the CPA program, so Chartered Public Accountant program,
Right.
working full time, and then coming back home and having kids. So all of this is very, very stressful and challenging. Is trying to balance all of this. It's challenging without having kids, but when you have kids, and that is a challenge. But it also something that kept me going. It was a very clear reason why I'm staying and why I'm doing this. So it kept me there. But I knew that once I get my CPA, I knew I was going and I was changing my profession. But I didn't have the courage to change completely at that time, because imposter syndrome. And hey, I just invested so much time getting the CPA, getting my degree and getting that experience. So starting over right now with little kids, no, it's out of the question. So I started transitioning very slowly, kind of just doing this little course corrections, just tiny little bit. So from big firm, I went to a smaller firm. So that was a little bit more flexible. It was a little bit, the types of clients were different, type of people were different. It was a little bit less rigid. So I shifted just a little bit. Then I shifted a little bit more and I went to an industry, a pharmaceutical company, where again, it was less accounting, more finance, more people, more training. So I did little shifts because I didn't have the courage to just say no. And in 4 years of doing the, work in industry and in finance, I remember getting an opportunity that was fantastic. So we had a program where people from finance could go to Africa and share their business experience with non-for-profit organizations and kind of just help them in finance, because non-for-profits are fantastic because they have the best interest in the heart, and they want to do and they care about people, but the business side, the business skills are often lacking. So it's about sharing that and bringing them to a different level with the finance skills. And I applied and I went to this life-changing experience, understanding that I missed so much, that giving and helping people. So when I came back, I knew with certainty that I had to do something about it. And what I started doing is I took classes. I started doing coaching courses, coaching program in parallel with my finance career. So that kind of became, again, another little step, another little course correction into the right decision. And then an opportunity came to move to Toronto. I was in Montreal at that time. So when I moved to Toronto, that was my moment. My kids were at this point 14 years old. And I said, you know what? This is a perfect moment. I'm not quitting my job. I'm starting from fresh start. This is an opportunity. And that's where I did my switch finally.
Can you walk us through kind of that, where you got the confidence, right? So you knew that you were transitioning, you had this life-changing experience, you had a coaching program you were dabbling on the side, you had a transition from Montreal to Toronto. So all these changes and things happening, and then you kind of say, well, I might as well add one more change into the mix. Is that kind of the thought process, or was there something else in play?
So what happened was, it wasn't just one moment in time. It was slowly kind of growing. And one of the things that I have noticed about myself a while back is that when people would ask me, what do you do? I felt this little, like somebody punched me in the gut. I didn't want people to ask me what I was doing. And it wasn't because I was embarrassed of what I was doing, but it just felt that it was a huge misalignment between me and the work that I was doing. So it sounded like my gut was telling me you're in the wrong place. And I remember there were so many nights when I would go to bed and thinking, I'm going to regret this. Like this, when you read articles of like what people regret when, just the moment before they die, what they're talking about. And I knew if I didn't change that, if I didn't really find something that would be in a good alignment with myself, that I would regret it. And I think that's what kept telling me, you have to do something about it. You have to do something about it. But it actually took me a while to figure out what is it that I wanted to do. It wasn't as easy as saying, oh, I want to be a therapist, because I didn't want to be a therapist anymore.
Right.
What I realized through my career, through my talking to people, I realized my strength was not in taking somebody who's not motivated at all, somebody who's feeling really, really down, and bringing them to the average level. My strength was to take somebody who was average and helping them create some big plans and goals and move really, really high up. So taking somebody who is ordinary and making them extraordinary. And that's what kind of was brewing and was evolving inside. And I was realizing I need to be able to do this and center my work around that. And that's how slowly I came to coaching. And then because of through my work, I saw the impact of bad leadership. I saw it. I was working with different people, and then some made me dread coming to work Monday morning. Even though the company was great, but having that manager said, I just don't want to face this again. It creates a sense of stress when there shouldn't be any stress. It just creates this feeling that I didn't want to have. And then there's some managers that made me believe in myself and take risky steps that led me somewhere really, really amazing. So I wanted to help create more managers that are life-changing in a very, very positive way.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's how I ended up here.
I heard a research study that people tend to get promoted into leadership positions around the age of 36, I think was the average, or was the mean, median, I believe it was. But people get taught on how to become a manager and a leader at 40. So there's like a 4-year gap. If they do it.
They do.
That's fair, because some people don't even get that, because you've already been doing it for 5 years. We don't need to teach you, and then
That's a good point.
It kind of continue on. So there is that discrepancy, and hopefully more and more of these kind of leadership skills happen even earlier. And I think that's definitely needed, because as you mentioned, I think there's a quote that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers or bosses, right?
Absolutely.
And it's oftentimes that's the case, where if the job's great but your boss is horrible, that's a really tough situation. But if your boss is amazing and the job's not that great, most people can deal with that and actually don't mind that as much. So talk to us a little bit about kind of that journey of finding where you are right now. And I think you're still on that journey to figure out exactly where but for those who are thinking of kind of changing things, and how do you find that path, and what were those things that you were thinking about in order to find kind of the fact that you want to help leaders or folks that kind of these average leaders become better leaders? What was that journey like?
So and so that journey actually was I remember the last year that I was with the company in the corporate world. I remember being given an opportunity to lead somebody as a very temporary assignment, because my boss was going on maternity leave at the time. So I was given this opportunity. I was so excited. I said, oh my God, like I love psychology. I do coaching. I mean, yay, let's do this. And I failed miserably. I remember realizing, oh my God, just because I was so good at my job and I understood the processes, just because I know psychology, just because I know all of this, does not make me a better leader. It really, really doesn't. So I felt I had the best intentions. I wanted to help. I wanted to evolve. I wanted to elevate somebody. I just failed miserably. And I knew this, and I knew that there is something missing, that I needed some very practical skills on how to become a better leader. And so that's what made me realize that so many people, and I saw this in front of my eyes, so many people are being promoted to leadership because they're great performers. It makes sense, right? So there is that progression of, okay, you've been with the company for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is, or you're a star performer. So now the next logical step is we're going to make you a manager. So we'll give you a team and now you're going to manage. Very few companies, now more and more, but I'm thinking 10 years ago, 15 years ago, not many people actually did have a formal leadership training. It's because it was assumed, because you know your job. So now you will just have to lead people who do the job you used to do. It makes sense. And what people started doing is saying, okay, I'm still doing the work that I was doing, and now I'm leading people. So it kind of became an add-on. It's like an additional task. Whereas leadership, to be effective, it's a complete shift. It's a different type of role, which requires different characteristics, different skills, different perceptions and mindset. And so that's having failed miserably. It was painful. My ego was bruised. Oh my God. And I just felt terrible. And I realized, oh my God, there is a gap. So feeling that, I realized many people are in this position. So how can I just take my drive to help people, my coaching skills, my psychology knowledge, and understanding also of a business and corporate world, and how can I help? So now all of the stars kind of came aligned, and that was my opportunity to actually use my skills to help leaders. And when I moved to Toronto, I joined the Achievement Center. And the Achievement Center already had a really good developed leadership program. So that's how I started going to organizations and delivering that program.
Sounds good. So thanks for sharing the journey along the way. And there's probably a lot of more deep dives that we could do in the future. But if you were to give yourself some SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier at different points in your time, maybe the most kind of pivotal ones along the way, like what are those moments, and what might you tell yourself if you could kind of slip yourself a little post-it note or like a voice memo or like a quick video to them? What might you share with yourself when you were younger?
Absolutely. So there's actually a few, and like we were talking, that the journey was non-linear and it's still going on, and there are ups and downs, but there's a lot of learning along the way, and I'm really grateful for that. And probably one of the biggest things for me is realizing that most of the barriers and challenges and blocks actually come from within, not from outside, but from within ourselves.
Right.
The biggest barriers. I think one of the life-changing and pivotal moments for me personally was when 1 year into my business, I was just not sure of myself. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have the best intentions. I know I have what it takes on paper, logically, theoretically, I know. It's just not working the way I was hoping. And I was ready to give up. And somebody recommended me a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And I read it. I remember going on vacation. And I said, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to make a decision, because I was at the crossroads saying, okay, I'm going to go back to corporate world or I'm going to continue with my business. I read the book and I actually finished it just the day before we went on vacation. And I remember I was running every day when I was away. And I remember the moment when I made that decision, realizing that the mindset, it is within me, and it's up to me to change things inside and not waiting for things outside. And there is freedom in that. For the longest time, I thought just because I learned and I read books and I was this lifelong learner that I had growth mindset. This was the assumption that I had about myself. The really eye-opening experience was when, after reading the book, I realized I didn't. That in many areas of my life, I had fixed mindset. And I thought that, I am talented in some areas, not so talented in others. And that's the reality. I couldn't really change that. Realizing that was a life-changing decision. And that moment, as I was running, I made this decision that I'm not going to give up until I succeed. And that everything that I need is within me, and it's up to me to make those decisions. So for anybody who is struggling with that, Mindset by Carol Dweck can be a pivotal book. And I think some of the other things are also not being bogged down by the how. There's so many times I have given up on things just because I didn't know how to do this. I would say like, well, I don't know, because I don't see the how, I don't see a clear path, then it means I can't do it. But instead, we need to focus on the what. What is it that we want? What does that after picture look like? how we want to feel after, and letting us kind of, be with this, stay with that. Because every time I had this situation where I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how, the how would magically appear. And there's infinite number of ways that the how can happen. And some of this we have no idea about, right? And sometimes we meet somebody who kind of shares an idea or shares a contact or shares some information that we were not aware of, right? Because there's so many things that we don't know. So not being bogged down by the how, and instead focusing on what is the after picture you would like to have, how you want to feel, how you want to contribute, how would you like to live your life, and then letting the how come to you. I think that was really important. And I think also surrounding myself with the right people. Our time and attention is really the most valuable asset that we have. So surrounding ourselves with people who support us, who learn, who strive for better things, for grander things, it really is a life-changing thing.
Yeah, I think all those are definitely thoughts that resonate with me. So I remember reading Mindset by Carol Dweck. I was like, oh yeah, that was definitely me. I was such a fixed mindset before, and I actually share with a lot of my clients that I say, your problem is 6 inches big. The problem is those 6 inches are between your ears.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once you get past a lot of those limiting beliefs, the mindset, the growth mindset, and there's so many layers to that it takes a while to unpack. But once you do, then there's a lot of things you can do. And then on the how part, like my simple approach is the what, why, how, right? So what do you want, first of all? Because a lot of people aren't even clear in terms of what they want. And if you follow like Simon Sinek, and he talks about like start with why. When you have that clear why, then there's a lot of purpose behind it and it drives. And then once you have those two, the how usually figures itself out pretty quickly. As you said, there's infinite number of ways to do that. And I love what you said about surrounding yourself with people, because I'm reminded of that Jim Rohn quote where you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
You
So
really are.
if they're all positive and they're achieving their goals and doing amazing things, well, guess what you're going to do? But if they're all just binging on Netflix and playing video games and whatever, guess what your future is going to look like? So I definitely echo a lot of those sentiments. And so Alena, if folks wanted to connect with you and learn a little bit more, where could they find you? And then hopefully we'll have you back and do a little bit of deep dives into any one of these various topics that we had. But where can folks reach out? And then what are some of the future aspirations that we might look forward to seeing from you in the future?
Yeah, well, so in terms of reaching out, probably the easiest way to connect with me is through LinkedIn at Alena Sviderskaia. That's where I hang out the most. Also, I have a website, it's alenasviderskaia.com. And in terms of future aspirations, there's a few things going on. Again, the journey is not over. There's the constant self-learning aspect is really, it's happening. I see progress every day. So I'm really curious to see where that's going to go. I'm in the process of writing a book that will help build that basic leadership skills for people who are starting out and people who have been there for a while, dealing with imposter syndrome and carrying all of this inside, thinking they're only ones, and they're not. And so it's kind of having that basic foundation, small little habits that can really make a big difference. And continuing working with companies that are willing and excited to invest in their leaders, that are really the pivotal blocks of the results and the culture, of course.
Sounds amazing. So thanks again for sharing your story and your wisdom, your insights, the SWIKE, the stuff you wish you knew earlier. And we're looking forward to having you back for future episodes and talk a little bit more about things like leadership, growth, even parenthood. Those might
yes,
well,
yes. That's a whole series of podcasts on its own.
For sure. Any last parting words that you'd want to leave our audience with?
Honestly, it's just, I think at the core of all of this is patience. Patience with yourself, patience with the journey you're on. Whatever you're striving to do, just being patient. We're always underestimate how long something will take us because we're excited. We're thinking, starting a business, trying to lose weight, start trying to learn how to play piano, all of this. When we're excited, it seems like, well, you know what? It's going to happen fast. It's going to be easy. And then the excitement starts to wear off a little bit. It doesn't mean that the why is not there. It doesn't mean that our intentions and the goals are disappeared. So it's being patient with yourself and being patient with that journey that you have to take and accepting where you are right now and taking baby steps. Honestly, baby steps sometimes are more valuable and more impactful than huge goals that we don't follow up on. So I think just patience.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so exciting.
Sounds good. So on that note, we'll end off the podcast, and hopefully we'll have you back for your future episode. Thanks a lot, Alena.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.